welcome to another adventure. We're in Barrington Tops this time. We've stopped at one of the many waterfalls on the Manning River. It's maybe a 300-400 metre walk up the side of the river to get to this spot. But as you can see there behind me, there's just beautiful cascades running through the river. I hope it's not too loud. I hope you can actually hear me over the noise of, or the roar of the water. And then down there is about a 5 metre drop into a second pool. We'll go down there and show you that in a sec. But the reason I'm here is I want to scope this out for a night image. I want to see if we can line the Milky Way up in that gap up there. See if that works as a night image, and then get the waterfall obviously as the foreground with the Milky Way in the background. I think that will make an excellent shot. I'm not sure if it will work, but I'm very keen to give it a go. So this is the bottom end of the falls. As you can see behind me there, that's the 5 metre drop. Beautiful pool here, and there's another secondary fall just there. So if my planning is correct, the Milky Way should be up in the sky up there at about 7:30 tonight. It's probably a little bit early, but it means we've beat the moonrise. So hopefully it'll be good conditions. It's going to be an interesting walk in the dark, but that's okay. What things we do for landscape photography, hey? But if it comes off, I think this will be a hell of an image, so fingers crossed. So guys, we're back in my study here, going to edit up the photo that I captured up at Barrington Tops, that night photo. Haven't got any footage of actually capturing, because obviously it's night, it's too dark, and I just found it too difficult. So instead I thought I'd show you the planning stage, which you've seen, and now I'm going to show you the editing stage. So bear with me as I open up my laptop. And so what I've got here is these 5 images that I've selected along here. I'm going to quickly just do very basic lens corrections on those. Sync those up on all. So they're all synced, and then these are all my light painted foreground images. So I took 5 different foreground images, and I'll go through those now. I'm going to open them up in as layers in Photoshop. I'll deselect them all except for that last one, and then I'm going to show you. So that's obviously got that section that I've painted. Highlight the next one, that's got a different section. The next one has got a different section again, and then this one has some closer into the foreground, and this next one is right down into the foreground. So for each of those 5 images in the field, I have captured a different section lit up. Now what I'm going to do is highlight all of the layers, go up here where it says normal, you've got your drop down menu. Now there's 2 ways of doing this. One is to go to lighten. I find that works pretty well most of the time, but in this case I'm going to go to exclusion. I find that works better for this particular set. Click that, and there's your stacked images. Now the problem I've got is that my torch has come into the frame a little bit here, so what I need to do then is find out what layers that's on, so I can see that's disappeared as I deselect that layer. So I will create a layer mask. Make sure you've got your brush selected, and I've got the black turned on, which masks. Click one layer there, so that's that done. I've also, looks like there's still a little bit there, so I think that will be the next layer down. It is. So I'll create another layer mask on that layer. Same again, make sure the black's selected. That's done. Now that's it, that's my stacked foreground image. So what I will do now is select all of those, right click, I've deselected, select all of those, right click and go flatten. Now this just reduces the file size, but once I've done that I can't edit those layers anymore, they're now one layer. Quick export as PNG. I've got my Barrington file there, so I'm going to go light foreground. You can see I've already done that. I'm just going to save it straight out the top of that other file. It's going to ask me, yes I do. So that's my foreground save. This is actually a final result, but what I did was get 7 images, these 7 here, and I did some basic edits on these, so I'll show you those. So I've adjusted the exposure up slightly, contrast. These are all global edits, no local edits. Highlights up, shadows up, clarity, vibrant, saturation, all that up a little, and then pretty much just the lens corrections and chromatic aberration. So what I've done then is save them. So I'm opening a program called Sequator. So this is the base program here. This is a star stacking program for Windows. So what I want is a base image. So as you can see, I've saved those 7 images to a file called stars. So I select the middle of those 7, so which is this one here, as my base image. I then select the remaining 6 images as my star image. Now you can look at that Milky Way now. You can see it, but it's not particularly clear. Then what I do is I double click on all of these to get this up, by the way, sorry. I'm gonna put that straight into that Barrington file, and I'm gonna call that Starstack. So I've just named my output file. And then what I have to do is, so you want to go to accumulation here, and you want align stars, accumulation, and this one is very important, freeze ground. You then want to go to sky region and select a regular mask, which then gives you this brush. You then paint in your sky, and you can adjust the size of the brush by just scrolling with your mouse to get into these tighter areas. I'm going to do this very, very rough for the purposes of this demonstration, but essentially you're just painting in the areas that you want as sky and making sure you do not touch anything that is meant to stay in place, because otherwise it will move. So that's done. I find there's a whole bunch of different options here. Auto brightness, reduce light pollution are quite handy. I'm going to leave it as absolute basic for this one, and I'm going to go leave it as is and go start, and this should take probably less than a minute. There you go, that's finished. You can see just there it took 48 seconds. So I close that now and it will load up the stacked image. There you go. So that sky is now a lot more, is going to be a lot clearer. That Milky Way is going to be a lot clearer. There's going to be less noise. I'm going to grab those 2 images. So Starstack was my star stacked image, if you remember, and light foreground was my foreground stacked image. Drop those in there, import those into Lightroom, click develop. Right, I'm not going to do any more adjustments in Lightroom for now. What I'm going to do is just highlight both layers, go back to layers in Photoshop, Starstack in the background and the foreground there. So that's, you do this either way, but what I'm going to do straight away here is put a layer mask on. I've got my black, I've got my brush, and watch what happens as I start to brush this in. So I'm brushing in that foreground light painted image, and you can see the detail appearing in that waterfall. That's exactly what I wanted. So there you go. I think that's pretty good. Those trees are still nice and dark off in the background there. I don't want to go too crazy on those. And that's it. That's now stacked. So I'm going to highlight both layers, do what I did before, just flatten the image. Bear in mind this is all very quick and rough is what I'm doing. I'm going to go quick export as PNG again, save to my Barrington. I'm going to call this final stack, save it. Really change, I don't think I'm going to do global adjustments because I don't quite need. So what I'm going to do is drop in a graduated filter here for the sky. And I'm going to warm it up slightly because it's quite blue, just very slightly. I'm going to add some contrast so the Milky Way pops a bit. I might even add a touch of extra exposure, pull those highlights up a bit, those shadows down a bit, add a touch of clarity to make that Milky Way more clear. A little bit of saturation. I don't know if I like that actually. And what I'm going to do is add some tint, because the Milky Way tends to look really nice when it's got that purple tint to it. And I think that will do for that. Now this area here I don't like, it's way too bright, so I'm going to grab a radial filter, chuck it across that area, going to invert it, there it is, and I'm going to drop the highlights to start with, and maybe then just a touch of exposure down, like that. That looks a lot better. I've still blown the highlights out there unfortunately, but it's okay. As I said, this is a very rough edit. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to call that my final image. There's that sky, the stacked sky, obviously a lot clearer than it would have been otherwise. And there's my foreground in focus. So I've used typical settings for the sky, f2.8, nice and wide open, about 20-second exposures, 7x7 at ISO 1600. And for the foreground, I've bumped the ISO down to about 800, I think it was. I'd have to check that, 800 or so. And I've put my aperture up to 5.6 and I've focused on this rock here so that I'll try and get more of the scene in focus. And then I've gone around the side and remotely controlled the shutter while I'm light painting from the side. I think light painting from the side always works better than light painting from forward. So I've stood basically over here and light painted that way, which is why you can see the shadow in that log there, and there's some contrast across the scene rather than just boof all being lit up. So yeah, that's the final image. So there you go guys, that's planning and editing a composite Milky Way image. Hope you've learnt something, enjoyed it, and see you next time. Thanks for watching.